Hey everybody, it's Mr. Marshall here at Stony Lane. So we are going to do a special series of videos right now. It's a summer read aloud. Okay, and so we're going to be reading a chapter book together and doing some thinking in that book together. So the book we're going to read is a book you may know, you may not know, was written a very, very long time ago. It's called The 100 Dresses. It's by Eleanor Estes, and it's a beautiful book. So one of the things that I know about this book is that it is a book that has something in it called a social issue. So there's a little bit of stuff that I want you to learn before we even start reading the book. So the first thing is that there's an issue in this book. So what's an issue? So everybody has problems, right? People have problems, and characters in books have problems too. And problems can get solved. Okay? Like something is missing and you find it, or friends have a disagreement and they work it out. Okay, issues happen in everyone's life too, but issues are much bigger. Issues are the kinds of things that don't get solved because those issues will always be there. Okay, so for example, an issue is violence, right? And even if the problem of violence in somebody's life gets solved, there will always be violence in the world. Okay? There will always be divorce. There will always be bullying. Okay? Even if it gets solved in one person's life, that thing is still going to exist. So this book has an issue in it. And so whenever a book has a social issue in it, there's certain things that we think about. And so let's talk about that. We've used this work of readers chart before, but this is one that's very specific to books that have a social issue in them. So in the beginning of a book with a social issue, the things we think about are, who are my characters, what kind of people are they, and do I like them, right? We do that in lots of fiction books. We try to get to know our characters as people, right? We think, what do I think is going to happen? That's predicting, right? We try to predict what we think is going to happen. But the thing that's different here is, what is the issue of the story and how does it affect the characters? So we want to start thinking about, what is the issue inside of our book? Okay, what is the issue inside of our book? What do we know about that issue? Because as people, we know about these things, right? And then we can start to think, how is this issue going to affect the characters in the book? Okay, does that make sense? So that's a big part of what we're going to do in this first part when we read the beginning of our book. And the one last thing that I want to tell you is we're going to use a tool to track our thinking, because there's going to be a lot of thinking going on. And the tool we're going to use is just a big index card, and it's called a character card, because this book is going to have a lot of characters in it, and a character card is going to help us to keep track of all our thinking, okay? Because there's many characters in here and it's easy to get them mixed up. And so we're going to put all our thinking about one character on one character card. Okay? That's it. That's all the teaching. Now we're going to start reading the book. Okay? This is called The 100 Dresses. And let's get started. 100 Dresses by Eleanor Estes. There's not a lot of pictures in this book, so it's just going to be really, you're going to be doing a lot of listening. The 100 Dresses. Chapter 1 is called Wanda. Wanda is a name. Wanda. So I'm going to make a card because I know we're going to be learning about a person named Wanda. So I'm going to make a card that looks like that. So I'm going to record all my thinking about Wanda on that card. Okay? Today, Monday, Wanda Petronsky was not in her seat. But nobody, not even Peggy or Madeline, the girls who started all the fun, noticed her absence. So someone's out and they don't even notice it. Usually, Wanda sat in the next to last seat in the last row in room 13. She sat in the corner of the room where the rough boys did not make good grades on the report card sat. The corner of the room where there was the most scuffling of feet, the most roars of laughter when anything funny was said, and the most mud and dirt on the floor. Wanda did not sit there because she was rough and noisy. On the contrary, she was very quiet and rarely said anything at all. And nobody had ever heard her laugh out loud. Sometimes she twisted her mouth into a crooked sort of smile, but that was all. Nobody knew exactly why Wanda sat there in that seat unless it was because she came all the way from Boggins Heights, and her feet were usually caked with dry mud that she picked up coming down the country roads. Maybe the teacher liked to keep all the children who were apt to come in with dirty shoes in one corner of the room. So she comes from a place called Boggins Heights. So she's got dirty shoes. So she comes from Boggins Heights. I'm going to abbreviate that BH. And she has dirty shoes. Okay? Let's keep going. But no one really thought much about Wanda Petronsky once she was in the classroom. The time they thought about her was outside of school hours, at lunchtime when they were coming back to school, or in the morning early before school began, when groups of 2 or 3 or even more would be talking or laughing on their way to the schoolyard. They sometimes waited for Wanda to have fun with her. The next day, Tuesday, Wanda was not in school either, and nobody noticed her absence again except the teacher and probably Big Bill Byron, who sat in the seat behind Wanda's, who could now put his long legs around her empty desk, one on each side, and sit there like a frog, to the great entertainment of all his corner of the room. But on Wednesday, Peggy and Maddie, who sat in the front row along with the other children who got good grades, didn't track in a whole lot of mud, did notice that Wanda wasn't there. Okay, so we have some new characters, right? We have Peggy. I'm going to make a card for Peggy and a card for Maddie. Right? Here's Peggy and Maddie. So now they sit in the front and they get good grades. See, like a long time ago, kids sat in the room based on stuff like that, right? And so they didn't have dirty shoes like Wanda. So I'm starting to think that the issue here is about something about where people live and what kind of family they might come from, or maybe how much money they have. Let's keep going and see. Okay, here we go. Peggy was the most popular girl in school. She was pretty and had many pretty clothes, and her auburn hair was curly. Maddie was her closest friend. Okay, so now we're learning something, right? We're learning that Peggy was the popular girl. Right? She was the popular girl. And we know that Maddie was her friend. Okay? But it doesn't sound like Wanda was popular. She was out and nobody even noticed. Let's write that down. Let's put that on Wanda's card. Okay, so she's absent. And no one notices. Okay. Alright, now let's keep going. The reason Peggy and Maddie noticed Wanda's absence was because Wanda had made them late to school. They had just waited and waited for Wanda to have some fun with her, and she just hadn't come. What kind of fun could they be wanting to have with her? They didn't even notice that she wasn't in school the last 2 days. They kept thinking she would come any minute. They saw Jack Beggles running to school, his necktie askew and his cap at a precarious tilt. That's right, boys used to wear ties to school. They knew it must be late, for he always managed to slide into his chair exactly when the bell rang, as though he were making a touchdown. Still, they waited 1 minute and 1 minute more, hoping she would come, but finally they had to race off without seeing her. The 2 girls reached their classroom after the doors had been closed. The children were reciting in unison the Gettysburg Address, for that was the way Miss Mason always began the session. Peggy and Maddie slipped into their seats just as the class was saying the last lines. That these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. So it's sort of like the Pledge of Allegiance, but it's the Gettysburg Address is something that Abraham Lincoln wrote right during the Civil War. Okay, and that's the end of that chapter. So they're trying to have some fun. They relate. So I'm going to put that on Peggy's card. They relate waiting to have fun with Wanda. I'm putting that on Peggy's card. Okay, we're going to read a little bit more. Ready? We're going to read one more chapter. We're still trying to figure out what this social issue is exactly, but let's keep going. The Dresses Game. Chapter 2 is called The Dresses Game. After Peggy and Maddie stopped feeling like intruders in a class that had already begun, they looked across the room and noticed that Wanda was not in her seat. Furthermore, her desk was dusty and looked as though she hadn't been there yesterday either. Come to think of it, they hadn't seen her yesterday. They had waited for a little while, but had forgotten about her when they reached school. They often waited for Wanda Petronsky to have fun with her. Wanda lived way up on Boggins Heights, and Boggins Heights was no place to live. It was a good place to go and pick wildflowers in the summer, but you always held your breath till you got safely past Old Man Svensson's yellow house. People in the town said Old Man Svensson was no good. He didn't work, and worse still, his house and yard were disgracefully dirty, with rusty tin cans strewn about and even an old straw hat. He lived alone with his dog and his cat. No wonder, said the people of the town, who would live with him, and many stories circulated about him, and the stories were the kind that made people scurry past his house, even in broad daylight. So it sounds like Boggins Heights is not a nice place to live. There's this one scary house, right? And that's where Wanda comes from. That's where Wanda comes from. So it sounds like we're talking about, like, maybe this is the issue is like class, right? Like not the class that you go to and who your teacher is, but like how much money you have, right? It sounds like Boggins Heights is a place where people might not have a lot of money, and so they might be different than some of the other people in the school, right? So what do we know about that? What do we know about that? We know that sometimes people that don't have a lot of money, like that's why they're like that might be why Wanda's shoes are dirty, right? Because she lives in a place where she doesn't have a lot of clothes, and she lives in a place that's dirty, right? It said here that Boggins Heights was a place to go if you wanted to get wildflowers, but it wasn't a place to live. It wasn't a place that people wanted to live. So let's keep going. Beyond Svensson's, there was a few small scattered frame houses, and in one of those, Wanda Petronsky lived with her father and her brother Jake. Wanda Petronsky. Most of the children in room 13 didn't have names like that. They had names easy to say like Thomas or Smith or Alan. There was one boy named Bounce, Willie Bounce, and people thought that was funny, but not funny in the same way as Petronsky. So that's another thing. Petronsky is it's an ethnic name. It's a Polish name, and it sounds different than a lot of the names in the class. So that's part of the thing. She's having a hard time fitting in. So I'm thinking this is not just about social class. I'm thinking this is about fitting in, right? There's lots of ways that Wanda doesn't fit in. So let's put that on her card. She doesn't fit in because of Boggins Heights, because her shoes, because her name. Those are all different reasons why she doesn't fit in. She doesn't fit in, right? So I feel sorry for her. Poor Wanda. Don't you feel sorry for her? Let's keep going. Wanda didn't have any friends. She came to school alone and went home alone. She always wore a faded blue dress that didn't hang right. It was clean, but it looked as though it had never been ironed properly. She didn't have any friends, but a lot of girls talked to her. They wanted They waited for her under the maple trees on the corner of Oliver Street, where they surrounded her in the schoolyard, and she was stood watching some little girls play hopscotch on the worn, hard ground. Not a lot of friends. So we're going to write that here too. Not a lot of friends. This is terrible. This is terrible. Let's keep going. Wanda, Peggy would say in a most courteous manner, as though she were talking to Miss Mason or the principal. Wanda, she'd say, giving one of her friends a nudge, tell us. How many dresses did you say you have up in your closet? 100, said Wanda. 100, exclaimed all the girls, incredulously, and the little girls would stop playing hopscotch and listen. Yeah, 100, all lined up, said Wanda. Then her thin lips grew together in silence. What are they like? All silk, I bet, said Peggy. Yeah, all silk, all colors. Velvet too? Yeah, velvet too. 100 dresses, repeated Wanda, stolidly. All lined up in my closet. Then they'd let her go, and then before she'd gone very far, they couldn't help bursting into shrieks and peals of laughter. 100 dresses. Obviously, the only dress Wanda had was the blue one that she wore every day. So what did she say 100 for? What a story. And the girls laughed derisively. And while Wanda moved over to the sunny place on the ivy-covered brick wall of the school building where she usually stood and waited for the bell to ring. But if the girls had met her on the corner of Oliver Street, they'd carry her along with them for a way, stopping every few feet for more questions. And it wasn't always the dresses they talked about. Sometimes it was hats or coats or even shoes. How many shoes did you say you had? 60. 60 pairs or 60 shoes? 60 pairs, all lined up in my closet. Yesterday, you said 50. Well, now I got 60. Cries of exaggerated politeness greeted this. All alike, said the girls. Oh no, every pair is different. All colors, all lined up, and Wanda would shift her eyes quickly from Peggy to a distant spot as though she were looking far ahead. Looking, but not seeing anything. Poor Wanda, right? Poor Wanda. Well, that's where we're going to stop. She's making these stories up about having 100 dresses and 60 pairs of shoes. I'm thinking that the issue here is she's not fitting in. She's not fitting in because she doesn't have any money. She just has the one dress. She's got dirty shoes. She's absent and nobody even notices. She doesn't fit in for all those reasons. Okay? So now we're kind of like wrapping up the beginning of the book. Tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to continue to read, and we're going to read into the middle of the book, and we're going to think about the problems that this is causing her. How is this issue affecting her? Okay? So tune in next time, and I'll see you then.